Hey, good morning, Grace Church. So good to be with you again this morning for another staff devotional. What a beautiful week we've had with lots of great warm spring weather, and I think it's going to be even warmer as we get closer to the weekend. So thanks for joining again this morning. Last week, I had the privilege of attending a AGC pastors and ministry leaders gathering where we basically just come together as area ministry leaders from the AGC churches in our area and share together. Sometimes there's a seminar, sometimes it's just a matter of sharing what's happening in our ministries. And with COVID, it was just a great opportunity for us to talk about some of the challenges we faced in ministry and then to pray for each other. It was a great time to just spend getting to know what each other's going through and then being able to lift those burdens up to the Lord on each other's behalf. And so it was a real blessing. During that time, one of our associate regional director of our area here in the AGC shared a verse with the group that really stuck with me because, it just really encouraged me considering the context of the passage he read. And I want to read that with you this morning. Just as an encouragement to you as well as we deal with challenges in life, especially when we're feeling discouraged or frustrated or fatigued, and not just COVID things, but other things in life as well. So the passage is in 1 Samuel 30, and I'm going to read the first 6 verses here. 1 Samuel 30. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. When David and the men who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep, David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. What an amazing passage here. And just to put it in context, so David and his fighting men had settled into this town of Ziklag away from King Saul so that he would avoid future conflict with him. But he and his men were out doing battle, and so their wives and children were left in the town of Ziklag. But their enemies, the Amalekites, came and raided the city and basically burned it to the ground and took all the women and children captive away from the city. Well, of course, David and his men returned home from battle and discovered that their homes were destroyed, everything had been burned, and the city was ransacked, and all their women and children were gone. And so what happens, of course, they're just totally distraught and devastated, and then they cry out in despair and weep until they had no strength left, we read in our passage. Then, unfortunately, human nature kicked in, and these men, these soldiers of David, they had just lost all their loved ones. They just lost everything they owned, basically, at the hand of their enemies. They were so devastated, and then what did they do? Well, in their pain, they lashed out and looked for somebody to blame. And David was unfortunately the scapegoat, right? They directed all their anger and grief at the loss of their families onto David. He's the one who had led them away from the town to fight. He's the one who was responsible for leaving the families there unprotected. Their loss was his fault. And so David, bore the brunt of that anger. And in verse 6, we read how he perceived that. It says, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him. They were that angry. They wanted to kill him because all the people were bitter in soul, each for their sons and daughters. But here's where we learn our lesson for today. Look at how David responded. His men were ready to stone him, but look at the end of verse 6. It says, "But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God." When everything around him seemed to be falling apart, his family had been taken captive, his home had been ransacked and destroyed, then to add insult to injury, his own men turned on him, ready to blame him for their loss and even kill him. But in spite of all of that, David found strength to cope with and persevere in this difficult time. He found that strength in the Lord his God. What an amazing example for us. Because you see, the God that David turned to for strength is the same God that we serve. I don't know what kind of challenges maybe you're facing, whether they're COVID related or not COVID related at all. Maybe you're having challenges in your family, maybe in relationships within your family or with friends. Maybe there's financial issues that you're dealing with, struggling with. Maybe there are health issues that are beyond your control that you are dealing with and struggling with. Well, whatever is causing you to be discouraged, to feel maybe frustrated or even angry at the circumstances that you're in, as David did, you can turn to the Lord and find strength in him. Jesus gave us the same hope, in a sense, that David here is showing us in this passage. Jesus tells us that we can come to him with our deepest, heaviest burdens. I love this passage in Matthew 11. I quote it often when it comes to encouraging someone in the time of disappointment and discouragement, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's the promise that Jesus gives us. He offers us rest. And that's just not comfort and freedom from all pain and suffering. He offers us peace and comfort as he comes alongside us to walk on those difficult journeys with us. And I hope that you can find that rest in Jesus today. The same God that David strengthened himself in when everything seemed to be totally turned against him, the same God that David served, we serve and can find strength in. We can find strength and rest in the Lord Jesus. Well, I hope that encourages you today, and I pray that you will find strength in the Lord our God in whatever circumstance you're facing. Well, God's blessing to you, and I look forward to seeing you again the next time. Have a great day.